Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. Hey, I don't think most people realize how much the direction that you hike the John Muir Trail can shape your experience. Everything from the terrain, the altitude, the weather, the views, and the permitting process. So last year in the summer of 2024, I hiked the John Muir Trail southbound with my teenage son over a 14-day period. Would I do it again? Today, I want to talk a little bit about the northbound versus southbound debate and let you know what I think is the best direction. So, the first point of consideration on your decision whether to go northbound or southbound, in my opinion, is the permitting process. Permitting process is significantly easier going northbound than it is southbound. Southbound is by far the most popular route to take. It's kind of how the trail was designed or originated, and that just becomes what everybody kind of wants to do. There are some benefits to doing that in terms of the elevation and what we kind of talked about in the context here. But northbound permitting is significantly easier because there is no lottery as there is on the southbound. So if you watched my video on the definitive guide to planning your John Muir Trail hike, which I can link up here, I walk you through how the permitting process works exactly, step by step, both the northbound and the southbound. So I walk you through the Yosemite side, I walk you through the Whitney Portal side, and I walk you through even further south than that, the Cottonwood Lakes trailhead area. So point number one, kind of the permitting system, I would say the point goes towards the NOBO side and the NOBO hikers. So that would be point number one to kind of consider. Let's move into point number two. This point number two is going to go as a point towards the SOBO direction and hikers. So point number two is really the elevation profile. And as we mentioned before, you're starting at a much lower elevation if you go southbound from Yosemite down to Whitney. Yosemite sits at about 4,000 feet in elevation. But the little lie to that is you're gaining elevation incredibly fast. If you're going to up through Half Dome, if you're going to do Half Dome, and then as you move beyond. So 4,000 as a start might seem easy, but within a couple of hours, you're already up at 7,000 feet. And at least where we camped, we were closer to 8,000 feet. So take, I guess, the 4,000 feet Yosemite Valley with a little bit of a grain of salt, because in that first day, you're going to be up 2,000 to 3,000 feet in elevation. That being said, if you start in the south and you're going northbound, chances are you're going to start potentially at the Whitney Portal, which sits at around 8,000 in and of itself. And then you're going to go up 6,500 feet to 14,005 to hit the top of Whitney, presumably the same day, although I guess you could stop short and camp about halfway up the Whitney Portal Trail. Or you're going to start in somewhere like the Cottonwood Lakes Trailhead, which sits at about 10,000 feet. So point number two of consideration is the elevation profile of the trail. And I think that will for the majority of people, that point will go towards a southbound route. So the third point I would say is really just kind of the scenery and topography. If you start in Yosemite going southbound, you're going to have a lot more lush, kind of foresty time and day as you're coming out of Yosemite. Probably for the first 2 to 3, maybe even 4 days, you are doing a couple little passes, but a lot of that's just kind of foresty, kind of hiking and trails. And it's slowly building as you get kind of around the halfway point, I would say, kind of the Lake Edison, VVR turnoff into much more of an alpine, multiple passes, 11, 12, 13,000 feet in elevation as you get towards Forester Pass. And then the vice versa of that would be obviously starting in the south and going northbound, you're going to start off with amazing, big, Sierra views. you're going to see for miles over some of these large passes. Obviously, Whitney at 14.5, Forester likely the next day or the day after at 13,120 or so, and then the subsequent, essentially a pass a day. So you're going to start off with big, open, beautiful views going northbound. So topography, that's one point. I don't know who gets that point. That might be a bit of a draw. It just depends on kind of what you're interested in. But that is another point, is kind of how do you want to start? Lush, foresty, building into the alpine, or start into that beautiful alpine and kind of rolled back down into the lush kind of forests and into Yosemite. So kind of a draw there, I think. I don't know that there's one or the other that's better. It might be personal preference. So we'll kind of keep that one in the middle. So point number 4, I would say, is really around the logistical challenges and what that's going to look like. Again, regardless of the direction you go, you're going to have logistical challenges. That's just part of hiking through the Sierra. And the Sierra just doesn't have a lot of easy access to towns, modern conveniences, places to resupply, things like that. Northbound or southbound, this may be a bit of a draw, but let me explain a little. So in the north part of the trail, the north half of the trail, you got a lot more options for logistical and kind of resupply. You can obviously do some things there in Yosemite Valley, potentially on your day 2, maybe your day 3. If you are going southbound, you'll head through Tuolumne Meadows. Tuolumne Meadows has a post office where you can send a resupply. There should be at this point a grill or the general store that's been rebuilt from the 2023 really, really heavy winter. A couple of days later, down near Mammoth and Devil's Postpile, you'll have Red's Meadow. A couple of days later, you could get into VVR and again, resupply there. And then I think maybe the next day or so, if you were to stop in VVR, you would be at Muir Trail Ranch, where you can also resupply. So in those initial first days, potentially as you're getting your legs underneath you, you could kind of do sending some resupplies to some of these locations if you wanted. But you are now kind of in a bit of a spot going from VVR through the rest of the trail. There's 2 options where you'd be able to get off trail, but those are going to be quite a hike over Bishop Pass, which is around 13 miles one direction off the JMT. A little further south than that, over Kearsarge Pass, which is about 6.5 miles off trail from the JMT, to go up and over those passes and then down into some of the eastern Sierra towns of Bishop and Lone Pine. That's going to be the case regardless of the direction that you choose. Now, if you do start on the southern side, you're going to be carrying a bit of food with you, especially up Whitney, if you're starting at the portal, which is going to make that one challenging. If you're starting in Cottonwood Lakes area, then you really have a big decision to make. Do you go from Cottonwood Lakes all the way to VVR or Muir Trail Ranch, which is probably 7 days minimum? Or do you choose to get off at Kearsarge Pass and go down into Lone Pine, spend a day kind of getting into down there, either picking up a box that's been mailed or resupplying at a grocery store somewhere? So again, what is easier, what is better? It probably skews a little bit towards the southbound hikers on this one, just because if you kind of resupply in VVR and Muir Trail Ranch, you can just go kind of the rest of the way to the Whitney portal and be done. Whereas going northbound, it's going to be quite a challenge to get 7 days into, or maybe even 8 days into VVR or over Kearsarge Pass and having to take an extra day. If your itinerary is flexible, then sure, that's a great option. I think for most people, it's probably going to be a little bit better going southbound. So point number 2 to southbound on this one. So the 5th point of consideration, I would say, is kind of mileage, morale, and momentum. As you are considering northbound and southbound, you're going to need to kind of look at what does the mileage, how does your body and the mileage you're able to do, how does that coincide with places to camp, where to get water, how many miles you're going to be able to do, what's the morale going to be? Are you going to be able to handle potentially getting right up into elevation and doing some big climbs early on? Are you fit enough to do that from day one at high elevation, doing 10, 15, 17, 20 miles a day and 3, 4, or 5,000 feet of elevation gain per day? Or is more of a gradual trail experience starting in the north and going southbound a little bit better for you? How is that going to play with your morale? And this is really an honest assessment. Are you somebody that kind of can get down, can get into your head a little bit, can have a bit of a challenge with some of the hard things that happen out on hikes and in nature? Or is that something that kind of mentally you've got that resilience and that's not going to be a big challenge for you? So, some considerations there, and really one for you to kind of do a self-assessment on. So that's kind of my fifth point. Again, that one's going to go both ways. I don't think there's a one that's better than another. That's really more up to you. Kind of looking at everything, it looks like we kind of have 3 points, in my opinion, 3 points to the southbound route and 2 points to the northbound route. All right, so let's wrap this up. So final verdict, what is the better way to go? And I don't know that there is a better way to go. Let's be honest. This is the John Muir Trail. This is the Sierra Nevada of California. I don't know if there's a more beautiful, spectacularly beautiful place. And so I don't know that one is better than the other. I think you got to take into consideration some of these points that I brought up and to what you are physically and mentally capable of doing and make a decision from there. Also, just the permitting process. Maybe you don't really have a choice because you missed out on the lottery. And so we're going to do everything we can just to hike the trail, even if that means northbound. I'd say that's a great plan too. Would I do it again? Of course, for the same reasons that we just said, the John Muir Trail being amazing and beautiful. Yes, of course I would go southbound again. That being said, if I were to do this again, I would go northbound. I would love to start a little bit further south. So northbound's going to add about 25, 30 miles starting from Cottonwood Lakes Trailhead. But I would love to have that experience. I'd love to kind of feel a little bit more like a through hike where you may have to get off trail over Kearsarge, spend a day and do a resupply, come back onto trail. I'd love to hike with some PCT hikers that are going northbound. So yeah, one better than the other? Probably not. There's a reason why people love to go southbound. Maybe I'm a little contrarian. Maybe I would just want a little bit of a different experience. And so if I were to do it again, I would absolutely, without hesitation and with great excitement, go northbound and give that a chance and see what that experience would be like, which I know would be pretty awesome. So there you have it. That's kind of my take on things. So comment, like, subscribe, do all those fun YouTube things. That really helps the channel out. And my goal in 1,000 subscribers. So if you wouldn't mind hitting that subscribe button, I would genuinely and very sincerely appreciate it. Otherwise, we will thank you, first off, for returning and clicking on this video. And we will catch you all in the next one. Peace.